For our next fireside chat, please join me in welcoming Brian Lee, CEO and founder of The Honest Company, and David Bell, author and professor at the Wharton School.
Okay, all right. Great to see everyone here at the inaugural Shop Talk. It's great to be on the stage with Brian. And so since we're in the political season, we're going to start with a little bit of get to know the candidate. That's how we'll kick it off. So Brian has probably the coolest byline that you'll ever find in somebody's wiki page. It just says, Brian Lee starts startups with celebrities. So before we go into learning about The Honest Company, Brian, you want to tell us about the playbook that you developed before you got into Honest?
Yeah, sure. So very happy to be here. So I started my career as an attorney, and then while I was at Skadden Arps, I kind of created my first idea called LegalZoom.com. And LegalZoom was very early. It was back in 99, 2000 when we launched it. And to bring credibility to the site, we approached Robert Shapiro, the attorney.
Oh, the OJ guy.
Yeah,
right.
yeah. And then he joined the company. And what I realized very quickly was every time he went on to CNN or any other media outlet and talked about LegalZoom, we would get more orders. So we knew that the influencer thing kind of worked when it came to media traction.
Okay, fantastic. So let's sort of roll forward a little bit. I think, we all know The Honest Company. There's probably a bunch of people in the audience who are customers of The Honest Company, but you want to just tell us a little bit about the business, sort of where you're at and how it got started.
So The Honest Company was started just over 4 years ago now, and it's been a pretty quick 4 years. But the idea, the genesis of the company really came from my partner, Jessica Alba. She initially approached me, believe it or not, like 9 years ago.
Oh, so we have to get this on the record. She approached you, okay? So Brian was approached by Jessica. So, okay, good. Yeah.
But
she didn't approach me, by the way. I can say that for sure. So.
She approached me like 9 years ago to help her start a company in the non-toxic, kind of healthy lifestyle brand world. And at the time, I was still with LegalZoom. I had just launched ShoeDazzle.com with Kim Kardashian. And so I just didn't have the time or capacity to help her. But then about 4 years after our initial meeting, she approached me again. And that time, I actually had a child in between the first meeting with her and the second meeting. And I actually really saw how my wife started changing her buying patterns. She started shopping at Whole Foods and buying organic foods to puree for the kids, and started using seventh generation diapers, truthfully, and Earth's Best diapers and so forth. And I thought, well, gosh, I think Jessica's onto something.
Yeah. No, it's very interesting. You see a lot of the companies that have started these days, the idea of personal experience with the brand, and also brands that have sort of integrity and authenticity. So I think, Brian, your wife was also involved in getting you into ShoeDazzle too, right? The way she was buying shoes. So one thing that always interests me as a marketing guy is how you come up with the name. So I'm sure you went through hundreds, if not thousands, but why The Honest Company?
Well, The Honest Company was definitely a better name than The Dishonest Company.
Yeah, we reserve that for the Australians. The
name actually came from Jessica's first daughter. I'm not sure how many of you know Jessica Alba's daughter's name, but her name is Honor. And so initially it was going to be called The Honor Company, and then we kind of changed that to The Honest Company. And it was really an idea that was, the name kind of stemmed from a place of authenticity. It was really about trying to be as transparent as we could with our consumers in terms of the ingredients that we use and the products that we represent.
Okay, fantastic. So The Honest Company obviously has grown. We can all look at the statistics and so on, but one thing we think about when we think about expansion is expanding into different markets, so different geographies, and also expanding into adjacent or different product lines. Now, obviously, you've done both, so just curious to hear how you decided which foreign markets to go into, and also which adjacent product categories, and if there are new markets and new categories that you're considering.
Sure. So when we first started the company, we had a great focus on babies and mommies because we knew that was the way into people's homes. The goal of the Honest Company really is to help create a safer and healthier environment for your family and for everyone. And so we started with 17 products, diapers and wipes being our mainstay, and then we started in baby shampoos and washes and so forth. We quickly expanded from there. We expanded into, I think, about 100 products, and we kind of went, horizontal in terms of our growth in product lines. In terms of our focus today, we just launched Honest Beauty about 2 months ago, or a few more, 6 months ago, and it's doing very well. But I think this next year is not so much about proliferating into new product lines as it is about driving deeper into the product categories that we feel we have a right to win, right? So I'll give you a story. Target, great partners of ours, called us and said, you've got the #2 shampoo at all of Target. And we're like, wow, that's great, right? And they said, the only one that outsells you is Aveeno. We're like, I've heard of Aveeno. And they said, well, Aveeno, they've got 5 different SKUs at Target, and you've got 1. But if you create a couple new scents and maybe a different size, we'll give you more shelf space. So of course our answer was, I think we're going to do that, right? So we developed some more SKUs, and we're taking more shelf space, at retail stores. This is the whole retail thing. Offline retail is new to me. I'm learning this as I go. I'm an e-commerce guy. I've never sold anything to offline before. Like I didn't even know that Target didn't like Walmart. I didn't understand
also,
channel conflict.
Let me give you another tidbit. Apparently it's Target, no? Target.
Target, exactly.
But actually, what you're saying is really interesting, Brian, because I remember the diagram that was up on the monitor yesterday with a speech in the morning, all the channels, all the time, online, offline, and everything else.
Right.
So just how did you kind of navigate that as a digitally native guy? How did you start dealing with this big footprint that you have in offline? Like, how did you choose the partners? Did they choose you? How did that?
Yeah, it's a great question. We started off as an e-commerce company, so we're digitally born. We never really thought about selling into offline until a couple smaller boutiques, baby boutiques around Santa Monica, actually asked to carry the products, and we said sure, and we gave them the products, and it was sold so well in these little boutiques. And then right at the same time, we got a call from another great partner in Costco, and they said they wanted to sell a family-sized baby shampoo. At first, we were actually very hesitant. We were like, I don't know, we're an e-commerce company. But then we really did some real soul searching, and we came to this moment where we decided, we're not an e-commerce company, right? Even though we started online, we're a very mission-driven business, and the only way that we'll achieve our mission is to be in people's homes. We should not care how our products end up in that home, whether it be you shop online, you shop offline, you go to Target, or you shop mail catalog. However you shop, our ultimate goal is to be in your home.
Yeah, I think one of the interesting things Brian's mentioning catalogs. If you talk to companies like Bonobos and so on, the catalog's actually a great acquisition channel because catalogs are so rare and so unused. So just one other question about the channel strategy. So I know you have your own store for beauty. Do you see Honest as having a footprint of pop-up or own stores as well as retail partners? Is that in the future?
It's not currently in the roadmap for this year, but we always thought it would be a great idea to have the Honest Company kind of experience location. It'll be a slightly larger footprint in the sense that we'll have maybe an organic cafe in there for the kids and a playground and kind of activities around a retail experience. But that'll come down the road when we're ready for that.
Fantastic. So, one of the themes that's been ongoing at the conference is this whole idea of listening to customers. And so just really two things around that. So number one, sort of who is the core customer for The Honest Company? And then secondly, how do you navigate the social landscape and listen to those customers? So a great quote, I'm going to give it without attribution because I forget who made it up, but it said, marketing should be the butler, not the stalker. So, how do you listen to customers and who is this core customer that's at the heart of Honest?
I think our core customer really is any mommy who loves their baby. And I think it's a big market.
Since you're giving statistics, I heard a great statistic the other day too. Apparently, 100% of teenage girls like to take selfies.
Yeah.
So it's in the same vein.
Yeah, but really, it's the Honest Company, I think, really speaks to today's mom, right? Today's mom is a very different mommy than they were even 5 years ago, 10 years ago. Today's mom is on Instagram and Snapchat. Today's mom, a lot of them have tattoos, and a lot of them still go clubbing with their friends, right? It's for the cool mom. And luckily for us, every mommy thinks they're cool. And so we speak to a lot of different mommies out there.
So who would you say that you're taking, because I guess the pie is probably relatively fixed, right? It grows with the population, but are there particular brands that you've noticed that you're really taking share from, or people out there are saying, man, this Honest Company is sort of eating our lunch a little bit? So.
Yeah, it's a great question. So initially, we were definitely kind of taking share and mind share from other kind of natural companies, other organic brands. But as we started to scale, we were definitely taking more, I think, market share from traditional CPG companies. We noticed that we're getting more shelf space at these retail locations that we play in. But in terms of brand, it's really interesting because I think the word brand is thrown around so much now. It's like everyone's a brand. Everyone wants to be a brand. But really, there's so few iconic brands in the world, right? You got Apple, you have Coca-Cola, Nike. I mean, global.
What about you've got the All Blacks? All Blacks.
But so how do you become an iconic brand?
Yeah.
Right, and that's what we think about every single day. Truthfully, I'll tell you a story. I was watching this commercial once about. It was Lance Armstrong before he got into trouble, but he was riding a 10-speed bike, and he was on a. I'm not sure how many of you remember this commercial, but he was on a mountain road, and he's just zipping in and out of these mountains, and just zooming in, zooming out. You just hear him breathing. You hear the wheels going, and at the end of the commercial, it was just the Nike swoosh, and it said "Live Strong," right? It was so powerful. I remember I was like, I think I'm going to get into biking.
Yeah, right?
When I actually went to the bike shop, and I said I want to buy a Nike bike. You know what he told me? He said Nike doesn't make bikes. I'm like, what do you mean? I just saw the commercial, and like, yeah, it's about living strong. It's not about biking. I'm like, that's an iconic brand. They could sell you something they don't even sell. And it's just, how do you do that, right? How do you resonate so deeply with your brand that it's more than the products or the service, or it's something that's inside of you that you understand when you see The Honest Company. You understand that this brand is me.
Yeah, I think that's just such a great insight that the brand just speaks to you so deeply. When you were talking about Lance Armstrong on the bike, maybe think about another great ad that Lexus used to do with just this sort of heavy bass line, ba-boom, 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 just going around this car, and then the tagline was, because you only go around once. I mean, I didn't want to buy a Lexus, but I like the ad. So, okay. So, you were talking before, Brian, about scaling. Obviously you've grown incredibly rapidly. So what have been some of the challenges that you've faced as you've scaled, things that have been difficult, things that maybe some adversity that you've had to overcome as you've gone through this, really huge spurt of growth?
Yeah, so we have grown pretty quickly. And the hard part is always bringing in the right talent at the right time. Because when you initially start, you want to hire really and bring on to your team just smart athletes, smart, hardworking athletes that could juggle a lot of different tasks. But as you start to grow, you have to start truly bringing in experts who have been there, done that, and have seen true scale, right? And that's part of it. The other thing about scaling a business, it's really about adding in a lot of process, but you want to add process in carefully, right? You don't want process to the point that it kills innovation, because innovation is everything, right? I like to say that you constantly want to innovate, and you constantly want to become the company that's going to put your company out of business, right? So it's all about innovation. You need process, but not to the point that process kills innovation.
Gotcha. And also, I got to thank you for hiring some of our students. Some of those students are pretty good athletes too. So, one thing that we deal with in the age of social commerce sometimes is also a little bit of adversity, right? So it used to be, 1993 in the New Yorker, that great iconic cartoon, nobody knows you're a dog. Now everybody knows you're a dog, just like that. So, how do you deal with adversity? People may be coming after the brand, the social conversations are happening that maybe are not consistent with the brand. How do you deal with it? Do you step back from it, or do you try and engage that?
No, well, the thing about negative press and so forth, it's, having a founder like Jessica Alba attached to it, it leads to a lot of clicks, right, for a lot of these media outlets. And people know that if they write about Jessica, they're going to get clicks. And so that's what kind of puts us into the limelight. But in sense of, how we deal with it, the first thing is that you want to get in front of the consumer and your own community, right? So the first time we had negative press, we did, I think, a terrific job in terms of having a direct line of communication with our own customer and explain to them, this is what we stand for, we're listening to you, and we're going to make it right. So that's number one. But number two, we just keep very focused on the overall mission of the business, right? With a company like The Honest Company or any hyper growth company, you're going to get a lot of scrutiny. We understand that. It's how do you move forward, right? How do you constantly make it better, and how do you communicate that to your community?
Yeah, I think that's a great insight. You always see, a strong brand knows who it is in a crisis, right? It's something that we see over and over again. So you mentioned, Jessica obviously gets a lot of hits and a lot of clicks and things like that. I wonder if you have a view on the whole notion now of organic celebrity. So we see people, for example, like Michelle Phan, right, who basically grew her own brand, now has Ipsy and so on. So she didn't come from a base of existing fame like Robert Shapiro or Kim Kardashian or Jessica Alba. You have a perspective on those kind of brands, and if so, would you ever consider partnering with an organic celebrity?
Yeah, I think influencer is an influencer, whether you're a YouTube star or a Viner or a Snapchat star, it's all about influence. But for the whole kind of celebrity / influencer model, I think what people have to understand, it has to come from a place of authenticity, right? It can't just be, Michelle Phan and Ipsy is a great example. She's a beauty expert.
Right.
People are going to listen to her when it comes to beauty, right? If you were to say, Michelle, why don't you go start a travel site? It just doesn't relate as well, of course. Even though she has, the 10 million followers or whatever she has, I don't think she's selling a lot of airline travel tickets, right? She's definitely going to sell a lot of beauty because that's coming from a place of authenticity.
Okay, fantastic. So, we kind of started the conversation, going back a little bit to Brian's playbook around developing from celebrity, because celebrity has audience. So another quote that I came across of yours, Brian, that I really enjoyed, and some of us aspire to do this ourselves. So Brian, you said, I have a lot of ideas, I want to start them all. And so the question to me is, where do these ideas come from, and how do you kind of weed them out? And I'll just sort of throw out a great quote, actually from Mark Pincus, who came and spoke in my class. And Mark distinguishes between ideas and instincts. And he said, I have sometimes really good instincts, but my ideas are terrible. So how do I make sure that the ideas that I keep are the ones that are consistent with instincts? So how do you go through that ideation process?
I kind of go through it in my own way. I do come up with a lot of ideas. I'm an entrepreneur. I'm sure a lot of you.
Yeah, we'll be selling them at the back over coffee. So.
And most of these ideas are crap, honestly. It's like I'll come up with something, and I'll be like, that's a great idea, and then the next morning I'm like, that's such a stupid idea. but really, some of them just kind of stick in my head, and they don't go away. And at that point, I'll start kind of thinking about it a little bit more. Maybe I'll put a team against it and kind of launch it kind of on the side. I'm really kind of focused on the Honest Company, so I don't have a lot of time to execute all my ideas. I wish I did. But for me, I think it's more, I'm really not a boastful person, but I think the one character trait that I have is I really think like an everyday person. I think like the masses, right? I could see something and say, you know what? I think a lot of people are going to like that. Right? I could listen to a song, for instance, and I could tell you if it's going to be a hit song. For some reason, I just think like an average person. And so I think I kind of use that instinctual ability to decide, how to move a company forward as well.
Yeah, fantastic. So we're actually heading up against the clock. We just hit the 0-0, but what a great message to take away. Just think like everyday people, because everyday people need stuff, All right, so it's been a real pleasure, Brian. Thanks for coming and joining us.
Thank you
Thanks
so
a
much.
lot.
Appreciate it.
Thank you, Brian and David.